right. Welcome back. You're the best. How was the food? Good? Awesome. We love our food here. It's all about the food, really. So we'll have after a couple more speakers, we'll have another energizing break, and then I hope you'll stick with us this afternoon. And when we get done, for a little bit, we've got some live music. Great singer-songwriter will be here, and then we'll have alcohol, which is always good, but not hard to find in Vegas. Alcohol and some delicious more food, and then you can go wherever you want to go for dinner. So, but before we get to that, we got 4 more fantastic speakers this afternoon. We got Ben Parr and Scott McCain and Nick Webb and Jackie Huba. If you love the morning, you're gonna love the afternoon. And I'm just gonna get things going so we can keep on time.
Ben Parr is an entrepreneur, investor, journalist, and the best-selling author of Captivology, The Science of Capturing People's Attention. He's the co-founder and CMO of Octane AI, the marketing automation platform for messenger and messaging apps. Earlier, Ben was a general partner at Dominate Fund, an early-stage capital fund. He was also co-editor and editor-at-large of Mashable, where he wrote nearly 2,500 articles on social media and tech. Born outside of Chicago, Ben currently lives in San Francisco, but remains a die-hard fan of the Bears.
Yeah!
Today, he'll teach us how to make our launches, campaigns, and brands more captivating. Please welcome Ben Parr.
All right. I only get 47 minutes, and we need to do a short exercise. You all just came back from lunch, and I like to get people screaming on video. So everyone stand up for just a moment. This is one of my attention techniques. And I have a phone, and I'm going to record you all. And when I say go, I just need you to make a primal scream, all right? Oh, thank you. The lights are up. I didn't tell them I was doing this. This is just the shit I do last minute. All right. 3, 2, 1. I'm going to go this way and back. Are you ready? That sucked. Are you ready? Yes! 3, 2, 1. Yes! I'm pretty sure everyone else in this hotel thinks that we're all dying. There was a zombie apocalypse. All right, now that I got your blood pumping, you're not looking at your Twitter and all that, I want to talk to you about attention. But before I do that, I want to show you a little clip that kind of explains how I feel every single day of my life.
Hi there. My name is Doug. My master made me this collar so that I may talk. Squirrel! Hi there.
All right. Raise your hand if you have never seen Up. Never have seen it. All right. A whole bunch of you have homework assignments. Your life is not complete. For those of you, Doug is the adorable dog who has no attention span, sees squirrels, and I feel like Doug. And I'm sure a lot of you feel like it as well. Constantly being distracted, so much information, all sorts of squirrel all the time. And it's not just me, and it's not just you, but it's the entire human race. And let me put a couple of statistics on what we're feeling and how attention has changed over the years. So, a study done at USC found that in 1986, the average human being was exposed to about 40 newspapers worth of information on a daily basis, through advertising, through news, through other mediums. 1986. 20 years later, 2006, that number had more than almost quadrupled to 174 newspapers worth of information just blasted at our brains. And last year, according to research given to me by Microsoft Research, the average human being was exposed to 7 DVDs worth of information daily. And that number is exponentially increasing. And so, raise your hand if you are a good multitasker. Raise your hand high. Every single one of you is a liar. There's no such thing as a good multitasker. Every single study shows that when we multitask, we are less effective and less efficient. In fact, those who label themselves as heavy multimedia multitaskers are actually the least effective at getting tasks done, at completing them on time, or completing them without errors. And so you have this dual problem of more information than ever being exposed to us, and us creating all these bad habits for managing it, like SpongeBob over here. And it leads to two problems that I'm sure you're very familiar with. One, it's harder than ever to stand out from the crowd with your idea, with your story, with your brand. But also just as important, it's harder than ever to defend your attention. Like this little kid who's going to probably have burn marks on his legs. It is harder than ever to defend your attention. And so it kind of led to my research to Captivology. And so, hi, I'm Ben. I've done a whole bunch of things. I sit on a whole bunch of boards. Most recently, after writing Captivology, my book on the science and psychology of attention, I started a Silicon Valley-backed company called Octane AI. The best way to think about it is all the cool things you could do in email marketing, we enable over Facebook Messenger and messaging apps, drip campaigns, segmentation, all sorts of fun things. Fun note, if you run a business that sells stuff online, come talk to me. I have a new thing that we're launching soon and I need feedback. There's my pitch for there. We work with a whole bunch of brands like Kiehl's and CoverFX and L'Oreal, as well as almost every major music artist. So if you ever got a Facebook message from Maroon 5, I'm sorry to tell you, it was not actually Adam Levine, it was our tech. So through all of this, and through all my work at Octane AI and through all my research for Captivology, I've come to a deeper understanding of how attention works. I went through over 1,000 years of research, almost 1,000 research studies. I interviewed almost 100 people, both PhDs as well as friends and business leaders, everyone from Sheryl Sandberg to Steven Soderbergh to David Copperfield, since we are in Vegas. And I want to share some of those lessons and experiences with you. The two key things I'm going to try to cover today are, number one, what is attention? And number two, how do you capture the attention of your customers? And I won't be able to go through all the techniques and all the things I've learned. Obviously, there's a great book that you can read that will help you with that. And at the break, I will be happy to sign all the things and all that fun stuff. Another thing, other reason to come find me during the break is if you want to go drinking with me later. Remember. So, let me start with how attention works. And so Doug will teach us about the 3 stages of attention. So, I find that most people think of attention as this on-off switch, right? Turns on, you're paying attention, you're not. You're either listening to me or you're currently looking at your Facebook, your ex-girlfriend or ex-boyfriend just posted something nasty. But really, attention doesn't work like that. It works in a phased kind of mode, and I want to explain those stages in this concept that I call the bonfire of attention. And so, just like a bonfire, attention is not a thing that goes on and off. A bonfire is not, here's some logs, boom, there's a fire. It has to start with a spark, the initial ignition, and then it has to grow. You got to put kindling, you got to put sticks, and then you could put the big logs on the fire that helps it grow all night. And attention works in the same way. And so to help me explain the 3 stages of attention, I'm going to turn to my friend Shigeru Miyamoto. My friend Shigeru over here is the creator of this small character called Super Mario. I don't know if you've ever heard of him. He is just the most visible and best recognized character in the entire world, even beating out Mickey Mouse. But in the early stages, it was not like that. He had to build this character from nothing and this brand from nothing until, 30 years later, it's 31 years now Mario's been around, into this iconic character that everybody knows. And he did it by using the 3 stages of attention, even if he didn't know it. And so those 3 stages of attention are immediate attention, short attention, and long attention. And so I want to explain to you each of those stages just for a little bit. So let's start with immediate attention. Okay, I woke you up again, didn't I? So immediate attention is the automatic sensation we have and the automatic response we have to stimuli. For example, when you hear a gunshot, when you have a smell, it's an instinctive reaction designed to protect us. The core of attention is to protect us from outgoing danger or threats. It's when you see that rustle in the leaves and you're like, is that a saber-toothed tiger? Or is that my next meal? And while I don't know about you, I haven't seen a saber-toothed tiger in a couple of years, those same instincts still drive us. And so certain stimuli and certain sounds and certain behaviors capture our attention automatically and is captured by a system called sensory memory. Super Mario, in the very beginning, had this problem where nobody could recognize Mario because Shigeru Miyamoto only had 16 by 16 pixels to create this character. And he's like, his first design was just like a shirt, t-shirt, small nose, looked like a blob of pixels. So how do you make him distinctive within the frame of 16 by 16 pixels? Well, you can't really draw hair in that space, so let's give him a cap. And you can't see a dark cap, so let's make it red. And you can't really see a shirt, but overalls are something you can tell, so let's give him overalls. And a small nose is not something you could even tell was a nose, so let's give him a big bulbous nose. And you know what, I can't really tell it's a nose, so let's give him a mustache. And when you combine all of those things together, you get one of the most iconic characters in history that is instantly recognizable. That is immediate attention. Short attention, on the other hand, is when you switch from subconscious to conscious attention. It's when you start studying for that test or you start playing that game. So in the case of Mario, it's a perfect edition of short attention where you only have to play for a couple of minutes because you're playing to get to the end of a level, to get a star, to get to the next level. And that is something that we can pay attention to. And so you can't give somebody one giant chunk all the time. You have to divide it up. If I was trying to give you a 14-hour lecture, you'd punch me. But that's why we have 13 different awesome speakers, and they're divided into clear sections in which human beings can actually pay attention to. And Shigeru Miyamoto designed the same kind of thing with Super Mario. That is short attention. And now the third stage of attention, the most important, is long attention. Long attention is the difference between you listening to Beyonce on the radio and you becoming a lifelong fan of Beyonce and buying all of her albums. I'm a Beyonce fan, by the way. Or in the case of Mario, the difference between playing a level of a Mario game and buying all the future games that Super Nintendo comes out of. It's the difference between a character and an icon. And long attention is our long-term attention on something. It's when we remember something so much that we go back to it. It's the difference between, just a random phone and lining up in line to go to the Apple store. And so one key thing to know about attention is that it is controlled by a system called working memory. And so working memory is the system that stores information temporarily and then decides whether it goes into long-term memory or is forgotten. Key thing here, write this down. Attention and memory are intrinsically linked. If somebody did not remember, they did not pay attention. Your goal is to get them to remember and to go from short-term memory and short attention to long attention. And this is a really complicated system, by the way. I don't have all the time in the world to go over how cool working memory is, but there is totally a book that has all the details about working memory if you're interested. I'm required to do 3 plugs for HarperCollins. They told me I had to, So, now you can kind of see the bonfire of attention. It starts with the spark, immediate attention, the ignition. And then it goes to short attention, the kindling, the sticks, the building up of the fire. And finally, it goes to long attention, the bonfire that grows all night. Those are the 3 stages of attention. And you need to work, and you need to put your branding strategy, and you need to do your work around those 3 stages of attention. Know what stage of attention you're supposed to capture, and then figure out how to capture it. Which, of course, leads to the other more important question, which is what triggers our attention? Because knowing how attention works is only the beginning. All of you, especially in this room, your jobs is to capture attention in some way. Whether you're trying to capture the attention of customers, or your boss, or even of your kids. Attention is the modern currency of the global economy. Without attention, you can't get anything done. Now, in my research, I found a lot of different things that do trigger attention, but there were 7 that clearly stood out from all the scientific research that's been done in the area that capture our attention across these 3 stages. I'm going to show you what those 7 are, and then I'm going to go in depth in them. Those stages are automaticity, framing, disruption, reward, reputation, mystery, and acknowledgement. I like how some people are writing it down as if they're still back in college. You're back in class, everyone. So, let me tell you about these triggers and how they work so that you get a better idea. We're going to start with trigger number 1, automaticity. Pretend you're a hitchhiker on the side of the road. We had a hell of a night in Vegas, and tomorrow morning you wake up on the side of the road. Maybe it's 40 miles out. You don't know where you are, what happened. You don't have a car, you don't have a wallet, you don't have your phone. You need to go and hitchhike. You need to get away home. Question for you, and just blurt it out if you know the answer. What color shirt should you wear to have the best chance of being picked up? All right, what did I hear? Red, what else? Yellow, what else? Blue. Who said no shirt? Hello. You win. No. Ding, ding, ding. It's not the answer, but I always wait. Someone always says no shirt. I know something about you. I'll see you at Burning Man next year. We are in Nevada. All right, so the answer is actually it's gender specific. If you're a man, any bright color will work. On average, if you're wearing a brighter color, you'll be picked up around 13% of the time compared to about 7 or 8% of the time. It can be neon, it can be gray, it can be any of that. And the reason that works is because bright colors stand out on the typical backgrounds of roads and dark grasses. Now, if you're a woman, it's a different story. On average, for most colors you wear, you'll be picked up about 13% of the time if you're hitchhiking, except if you wear the color red, in which case that doubles to 21%. Just the color change does it. And it's not because of the contrast it has with its surroundings. It helps, but it's not the main reason. The reason you're getting picked up is because of the romantic associations we subconsciously have with red and romanticism. In fact, if you just put a thick red border around a person's face, the opposite gender will rate that person as 3 points more attractive. I need an excuse to put up this picture. Thank you. If anyone wants to go dancing later. In fact, if you wear the color red, if you wear a red dress or a red shirt, another fun one, the opposite gender will sit on average 6 inches closer to you than they would otherwise. There's all these subconscious cues that control and captivate our attention in ways that we either don't know or we're not even willing to acknowledge. And this is the power of the automaticity trigger. It's that attention, immediate attention specifically, is an automatic response. We respond automatically to these stimuli. And there are 2 key parts to the automaticity trigger. One is contrast, so the contrast of that background. A brighter color or a louder sound in a quiet room like what happened before will capture your attention. And association, the subconscious associations we have with different stimuli, with different colors and different smells, based on our upbringing, based on our backgrounds, based on our biology. So the lesson here is to always use the right color for the job. Color is the most important of the sensory triggers in the automaticity trigger. So kind of a couple examples. Here's Captivology. I have to do the one more plug. But you can kind of see where does your eye go to on the page? It goes to where you click the buy buttons. Amazon's the master of this. People click those buttons all the time. Why? Because these colors have a higher contrast on white and gray backgrounds, the typical backgrounds you have for websites. And as a result, people click it more. But if you did bright neon colors or other bright colors that had high contrast, they would work as well. And lots of research shows that they would work. Now, we're going to play a different game. If this person walked into your office to get a job interview, would you give that person a job? Probably not. Some of you are like, I'm thinking different, but this color does not show competency. It captures attention at a contrast level, but it also has to match what you're trying to do and what you're trying to accomplish. And so blues and teals typically are the colors that are related to competences, for example, in Western culture. And there's this whole giant color wheel that if you come find me later, I will send you that link. I will show you all of them because it really does depend on cultures. In Western culture, brown is the most associated with ruggedness, black with luxury. Blue universally means cold, but red does not universally mean love. The color of love is different in so many different cultures. One other automaticity tip for you, if you are trying to close a deal, bring your guest a warm cup of coffee. The reason for this is not because you're giving them something and that you're being generous. It's actually because of the physical warmth of the cup. So a whole lot of research has found that when we hold a warm object, we are more likely to be more generous in our giving and in our agreement with somebody, and tend to rate somebody as more likable just by holding a hot object. And so the next time you're trying to close a big deal, just bring a warm cup of coffee and give it to them and have them hold it, and they'll be more likely to close a deal with you. Trigger number 2, framing. To teach you about framing, I need to talk to you about the story of deodorant. Raise your hand if you don't use deodorant. Thought I'd try. Somebody was, forgetting to smell good. Now, you all smell great. I'm sure you all use deodorant, but in the early 1900s, nobody used deodorant. Instead, this is what they used: dress shields, cotton pads, rubber stoppers in their armpits. And this was weird because deodorants and antiperspirants had already been invented in the 1800s, but nobody used them. And there were 2 clear reasons why. The first is that people thought it was unhealthy, that it would kill you to wear deodorants and antiperspirants. But the second reason was the bigger one. It was the fact that it was not ladylike to discuss bodily fluids. It was not Victorian. It was not proper. So nobody ever discussed the subject. Now, in the early 1910s, there was this young teenage entrepreneur. Her name was Edna Murphy. And Edna, her father was a surgeon, and he had invented an antiperspirant for his hands so that he didn't sweat during surgeries. And Edna, being a genius, was like, I could use that for my armpits. So she packaged it up into a product. She got a $500 investment from her grandfather, and she created Odor Oh No. That is literally the name of the product. So she created Odor Oh No, and she started selling it, and it did okay, especially on hot summer days, but she wasn't getting all that far because of these 2 frames of reference that I showed you before. The issue with not wanting to discuss it, and the issue of thinking it's unhealthy. So she teamed up with a guy named James Webb Young, the eventual first chairman of the Ad Council, and together they tackled this issue when he was a copywriter. So first question, how do you get people to realize that it won't kill you to use deodorants and antiperspirants? Well, a doctor invented it. So they did an advertising campaign talking about how it was recommended by leading physicians. And in fact, this is one of those ads. Talk about leading physicians recommend it, and it's guaranteed to be harmless. And this ad campaign in the early 1910s doubled the sales. But they were still hitting a ceiling on sales because nobody wanted to put it on because nobody was talking about it. So they had to up the ante a little bit. So in 1918, they put out this famous ad, "Within the curve of a woman's arm, a frank discussion of a subject too often avoided." It was put in the most popular magazine of the time. Anyone know which one that was? Who said that? Who said that? Ladies' Home Journal? You win. What's your name? Did you read my book, or are you just smart? You're just a genius. She's just a genius. If you want to talk to a genius, she's over there. So this ad is a very straightforward ad. It's saying, hey, we all have body odor. You can fix it. There's this product that fixes it called Odor Oh No. Try it out. Buy it today. This ad was the most controversial ad of 1918. Hundreds of women canceled their Ladies' Home Journal subscriptions in protest of the ad. I don't know what they would think of today. But the ad did its job. It broke the frame of reference. People could talk about antiperspirants and deodorants and bodily fluids. Suddenly, ads were moving everywhere, and people were talking about it and recommending products. And the industry boomed and turned into the multi-billion-dollar market it is today. And Edna Murphy, she sold her company less than a decade later for millions of dollars. The lessons here are that you have to adapt to your audience's frame of reference, like Edna was able to do when she figured out that they needed to talk about the health. It wasn't going to kill them. And you have to find a way to reframe the conversation. So they had to figure out a way to make it possible to talk about antiperspirants and deodorants when nobody wanted to. And this is the power of the framing trigger. It's the fact that we can pay attention to things that fall within our frame of reference and shockingly ignore anything that falls outside of it. Politics is the perfect example of this in action. Whichever side you're on, always so very divisive. The power of the framing trigger is that I can support any number of issues. I could support abortion, or I can be against it. I can be for or against gun control. And if you tell me an argument that doesn't fall within my frame of reference, I'm not going to listen to you. That message is not going to get through. Not without you trying to reframe the conversation or find a way to adapt to that message. That is the frame of reference. The frame of reference being that frame in which we view the world because of our biology and because of our culture and our upbringing and our values. So, Oder or no, in their case, they were able to adapt to the frame of reference by advertising the fact that doctors were recommending it, and they were able to reframe the conversation by discussing the product in the public and push against that frame of reference and break the frame of reference and make it okay to discuss. So one other quick tip for you that should be helpful for a frame of reference. Raise your hand if you like Twinkies. Raise your hand. You all have terrible tastes. I mean, come on. By the way, you're seeing there's a little trap here every single time. Now, I don't know why you like these tissue wrap paper pieces of poop, but years ago, that's what they are. Have you tasted one? They're awful. There's so many better choices. You're in Vegas. But Twinkies, despite being awful, there was a couple years ago, they sold out completely, right? You remember that? Because the company that created them was going out of business, and now everybody had to have them. They didn't taste any less shitty, but everybody had to have them. I'm sorry if you're at Hostess. The reason for this is scarcity. Scarcity changes the frame of reference. You don't have to change the product, but if something is scarce, people are more likely to want it and pay attention to it. But there is a caveat to that. They're going to pay attention to it. If it's scarce because of an outside factor. So another study found that if something is scarce because of a manufacturing error or something's going out of business, something out of your control, then you're more likely to want it and pay attention to it. If it's out of stock or something like that, or scarce because it's popular, it won't change the attributed value that you have on that object or product. So think about like Gmail as an example. It's a perfect example of this phenomenon when they first put it out. When they first put Gmail out, they only had a couple of invites. People wanted them really badly. They made artificial scarcity, and as a result, Gmail became a super popular product. People offered me hundreds of dollars for my Gmail invites. It was a perfectly executed framing trigger campaign. Trigger number 3. Has anyone ever eaten at the Dominican Cell Bakery? Anyone know this bakery? Only a few of you. So this bakery, oh good, a few of you have been to New York. So this bakery in New York, years ago was unknown, and this baker was unknown, but this pastry chef. But a couple of years ago, this pastry chef became a viral sensation when he invented this item called the cronut. Anyone ever had a cronut? If you haven't had a cronut, you need to have one. It's delicious. Croissant with donut in it. And so he invented this item that completely disrupted people's expectations. No one had ever done this. No one ever thought of this. It's like, it seems obvious now, but it hadn't seemed obvious then. And so this unique object, because it was so unique and it was so disruptive, got 140,000 articles and links written about it within a couple of months and helped propel Dominique's career to soaring heights. Now he has bakeries all over the world, is on TV shows, has turned his small business into a gigantic empire as a result of inventing one crazy item. This is a perfect example of the disruption trigger. The disruption trigger is the fact that we pay attention to the people and things that violate our expectations of the world. And it's an automatic kind of sensation. So a study that kind of puts this into context, there was this one study, and what they did was they would ask people to, specifically teenagers, they'd ask them to read aloud certain sentences, and they would see which ones they could remember. Some of the sentences were pretty standard. They'd be like, the nuns put the food on the table. And then some of the other ones were more like, the nun licked the ammonia off the floor. Which sentence are you going to remember more? There's actually a scientific term for this. It's called the bizarreness effect. We have a much stronger memory for things that are bizarre and out of place. The scientific reason for this is because, again, attention is a defense mechanism. If something is out of place, then we need to pay attention to it. If we're sitting in this room and an army of clowns walks in, we're going to watch them because either they could potentially be a threat. Why are they here? What are they doing? We have to resolve that. If we don't resolve that, then we could die. It's the same kind of thing, the rustle in the leaves. That's something that's out of place. It disrupts our expectations. That's either food or threat. It's an attention defense mechanism. So, one other example on the branding side. One of my favorite examples is Patagonia. So years ago, Patagonia had this campaign where they told people, don't buy our jackets. Doesn't make sense. You're a clothing company. You should want people to buy your jackets, right? But in their case, they did this disruption campaign where they said, don't buy our jackets. And then if you dug deeper, you found out that there was a real reason for it. What they were trying to say is Patagonia is a brand about conservation and about outdoors. And if you're buying too many things, then you're hurting the environment because it takes a lot of water and it takes a lot of resources to make these jackets. So we promise as Patagonia, if you bring in your jacket, we will repair it and we will help you. But of course, if you want to buy a new jacket from us, we'd be more than willing to sell it to you. And this campaign where they told people to not buy their stuff made people buy more of their stuff. Their sales doubled within 9 months of this campaign starting, and all they did was disrupt people's expectations, but in a positive way. The key here is that a disruption has to match your brand's values. It's very easy to capture attention with disruption. If you came walking in naked here, we'd pay attention to you, but would we want to do a deal with you? Maybe a few of you, but not me. But if you want to capture attention and have it stay and have it match your values, you got to find a way for it to match those values. I call this in my research significance, and I want to show you an example of this gone wrong.
We love these subs! Subs are $1 off when you bring in a coupon. All things to eat, oil changes. Home only runs on 4 blocks. Any coupon box. Beware of paper cuts. The Quiznos subs.
Quiznos. Toasty.
Okay, class, let's discuss this. What did you just see? You just saw a bunch of mutant rodents dancing and singing off-key next to your food. Does that capture your attention? Oh, hell yes. Does that make you want to eat their sandwiches? No, they went bankrupt in 2015. So, trigger number 4, the reward trigger. I had the opportunity to interview a leading researcher at the University of Michigan, and Dr. Kent Berridge. And his research focuses on dopamine. So you've all probably heard of dopamine, right? It's that drug in the body that creates pleasure. But the truth of the matter is that's not quite accurate, not quite what dopamine does. So to explain dopamine, what he did was he had these lab mice, and he would take dopamine out of a subset of these mice to see what would happen. And what he found was that when you took the dopamine out of these mice, they could still feel pleasure. If you gave it sugar water, it would still find it tasty. It could feel pleasure. It could feel a reward. What happened was these mice lost all motivation. They didn't want to go after rewards. In fact, most of them died because they would rather die than eat. They just didn't have the reward mechanisms to go eat food or even to live. And so what dopamine does in the body is create a wanting response, which is the key here for attention. Opioids in the body create the liking response that actually makes you feel good. It's the dopamine that makes you desire something. And in our case, in the reward trigger, you want to create that dopamine wanting response. You want people to want something, to want your product, to want your idea. And that is the power of the reward trigger. Now, there are 2 types of rewards that you can deliver. One is extrinsic rewards. Extrinsic rewards are the ones that we're all very familiar with. They are things like food, money, sex, or, food wrapped in money, which would be cool. They're visceral, they're short-term, they're tangible. On the opposite end of that spectrum are the intrinsic rewards. These rewards are things like self-satisfaction, like Data has here, purpose, mastery. It's the long-term kinds of rewards. And if you're trying to capture attention as a master of attention, you need to capture both types of attention. For example, employees, you need both extrinsic and intrinsic rewards. You need to show them that you care with bonuses, but you also need to give them a purpose. They either want to learn something at that job, or they feel like that they're doing and accomplishing something. And so you have to do both extrinsic and intrinsic rewards to succeed. So my suggestion to you is to think beyond the incentives. Super easy to drop into that. So most kinds of rewards are things like, if I give you this, you'll get this. Airline rewards, most reward programs are like this. A better way to deliver rewards is something called post-action rewards, where a reward is given even if you didn't know it was going to happen. My friend Brian Wong has a company called Keep that does mobile advertising. It'll do things, though, like deliver a reward when you least expect it. So, for example, you get your longest run yet, or you hit a high score in a game, and then it says, hey, congrats, you win this, you've earned a reward, that prize. It could be a Gatorade, it could be points. But you didn't expect it. You didn't know it would happen. So as a result, you feel more pleasure. Scientifically, with post-action rewards, when we receive them, we tend to have a better memory of them, which means we paid more attention, and we tend to have a more positive association with the person or thing that gave us that reward. I think a good brand example and a bigger one is Panera, where with their My Rewards, you don't always know when a reward will happen. You can scan the card, and sometimes a reward will just pop up, and people really like it. It's why they have some of the highest retention in their rewards programs. And in fact, there are a lot of ways in which you can deliver rewards, 6 different ways. I won't go through them all right now, but all these other ways can be better than incentives. You'll need to use each of them in the right kind of way. For example, you will want to sometimes have random rewards so people can't predict when they'll get a reward. But on the other hand, you will always want to have some kind of incentive so people continually work up towards something. And I leave it up to you to figure out the best way to implement rewards in your product, in your system. There's lots of ways to do it. Trigger number 5, we're almost there, everyone. Reputation. So, I love this study. This is actual brain scans from a study done at Emory University. What they did was they had a bunch of people come in, and they would have them make economic decisions with their money. And in these decisions, they'd have to think about finances. And so the decision-making centers of the brain, the critical thinking centers would light up. Now, in half of this study, they would have an expert come in. This would be a professor of economics, and that professor would give them specific advice on how to spend that money. And what they found was when the professor was in the room giving them advice, the critical thinking centers of their brain shut down. It was as if they offloaded the processing power of their brains to the expert. They almost always did what the expert told them. And even when the expert was giving clearly bad advice or overly conservative advice, they would more likely follow that advice anyway because they weren't critically thinking. This is actually called directed deference. It has a scientific term to it. It's our incredible ability to pay deference to experts. Another study that highlights this, if I were to wear a doctor's coat, I would score better on tests. So what they found was by merely putting on a doctor's coat, people would score better on attention and memory-related tests. My favorite part of this study, though, was they had another group. They'd give them this exact same coat, but they'd tell them it was a painter's coat. And when they told them it was a painter's coat, their test scores went down the crapper. Nothing changed about that coat. It was just the perception. The mere perception of expertise makes people pay more attention. Now, in the reputation trigger, there are 3 types of reputations we pay attention to. The reputation trigger being the fact that we pay attention to these reputable sources of information. Those 3 are experts, authority figures, and the crowd. Authority figures are pretty straightforward. If you don't pay attention to an authority figure, you will be punished. Now, when the punishment goes away or that you don't believe the punishment will happen, you won't pay attention anymore. The crowd makes sense because it acts like an expert. So if you're looking for a restaurant, you're here in Vegas, what's the first app you're going to open up? Yelp. It's the crowd rating things. And in fact, the crowd is pretty good at rating things and at being a collective expert in those types of situations. Where the crowd goes wrong is when there's a charismatic figure who leads them in a specific direction that's wrong. But experts is the most powerful of these 3. It's that directed deference that makes them so powerful. So this is from the annual Edelman Trust Survey. And so they do this trust barometer where they measure levels of trust all across the world every single year, Edelman being the giant PR firm. Now, you can see on the left, the people that are rated as the most trustworthy are experts, both technical and academic experts, and people like ourselves. And so if you want to have somebody as an expert on your thing, you want to have that. On the opposite end, raise your hand if you're a CEO. Raise your hand, anyone? 1 or 2. You are the least trustworthy people here. Actually, no, you're the second. Government officials are the least trustworthy. So how do the masters of attention create captivating messaging? One, they leverage experts. So Oder Ono, they leverage the expertise of doctors for their product. If you remember, they use doctors. And two, become the expert. So tooting our own horn, Octane AI, before we started the company, we created a publication called Chatbots Magazine. It's the #1 guide for learning about bots. If you search anything about chatbots or AI or conversational AI, we will pop up. Has more than 250,000 readers every single month. And as a result of creating this publication with over 400 writers writing for it every single month, we became the go-to experts. Lots of brands, lots of companies, lots of individuals came to us for advice on how do we do bots, how do we do Facebook Messenger, how do we do any of those things. That expertise made us captivate attention. Trigger number 6, 2 triggers left. Anyone know what movie this is from? Cloverfield, you get a prize. I don't know what your prize is. Your prize is a drink if you find me later. Who was it? Raise your hand. All right, you get a drink later if you find me, from me. So Cloverfield is the master of mystery. So J.J. Abrams, the Star Wars guy, the director of Star Trek, he is the master of having mysteries in not just his stories, but even in their campaigns. I hate these trailers that show off the entire storyline because there's no mystery, there's no reason for you to go anymore. J.J. Abrams never makes that mistake. Cloverfield and its successor did really well because nobody knew what the ending would be. You barely saw any of the movie. And the reason that mysteries capture our attention is twofold. One, it's because of something called the Zygarnik effect. So there was this Soviet researcher, Bluma Zygarnik. She was sitting at a restaurant one day, according to legend, in the 1950s, and she was really, really surprised by how well waiters could remember her orders. And then once they dropped the orders off, they wouldn't remember it at all. So she had a bunch of students. They wanted to figure out why. So she had a bunch of students put together puzzles, and they did puzzles. And in some of these cases, so they take the puzzles away halfway through. Kind of dick, right? But what they found was weeks and months later, when you asked the students about which puzzles they remembered, the only ones they remembered were the ones that were incomplete. The Zygarnik effect is the fact that we have a strong memory for incomplete tasks and incomplete thoughts. Incompletion is something that sticks in our brain like a thorn. Second reason is something called uncertainty reduction theory. So pretend you and I are on a date. You're looking at your iPad right now, but we're on a date, all right? I'm looking at you. We're on a date. Don't look at them. We're on a date, okay? And if we're on a date, we're going to probably ask kinds of questions like, where are you from? How's your family? Do you have brothers and sisters? Things like that, right? I don't know what you ask on dates, but that's what I ask on dates. We ask these questions because we want to gain more information, because we're uncomfortable with strangers and with no information. We're gathering information to figure out, oh, is that person someone I want to continue dating? Is that person a creep? Do I even want to meet this person that I found on Bumble or Tinder or whatever app there is now? That's the uncertainty reduction theory. The more uncomfortable we are, the more we want to reduce uncertainty. And mysteries are all about uncertainty. Example of this in the news. Years ago, you probably remember the Malaysian Airlines disaster where this plane came up and disappeared. Now, planes unfortunately crash from time to time. But this story stayed in the news and on CNN's front pages for a month because of the mystery of where this plane go. That's not what's supposed to happen. A plane is supposed to, reappear. But they never could find the plane, so everyone speculated. People needed to fill that uncertainty gap. There are 4 core elements to a mystery: suspense, buy-in, plot twists, and cliffhangers. I don't have enough time to really go in depth. You kind of understand these core elements, but if you don't have all 4, then you aren't able to capture attention. But let me show you an example of it in a moment-to-moment ad and how mystery works, even if you know how the ending's going to go.
When I wake up, well, I know I'm gonna be the man who wakes up next to you. And when I go out, yeah, I know I'm gonna be the man who goes along with you. I would walk 500 miles and I
puppies in all my presentations, but the reason I had that is you know that the puppy's going to survive, right? They're not going to kill the puppy on a national television. But there's moment-to-moment suspense. How's the puppy going to escape? We found that ads that have more moment-to-moment suspense are rated more highly and are more memorable. Final trigger. We're almost at the end. Acknowledgement. The most powerful of the captivation triggers. Raise your hand if you're a married woman. All right, this study is for you. There was a study. What they did was they strapped electrodes to the ankles of married women to see how much pain they could tolerate. Literally. And they put them into 3 different groups. Group 1 sat alone in a room, and Group 2 could hold the hand of a stranger. Group 3 could hold the hand of a loved one, of their husband. What they found is, unsurprising, that the women who felt the most pain were the women who had nobody to hold the hand of because they had nowhere to redirect their attention to, and the women who felt the least amount of pain were the women who could hold the hands of their husbands. But they found an unexpected secondary effect, which is the fact that they found a direct correlation between the strength of the marriage and the amount of pain these women felt. The more strength in the marriage, the less pain. The power of love literally overcame the power of pain. This is the power of acknowledgement. Wow, she's screaming. I'm so sorry. The power of acknowledgement. We pay attention to the people and things that pay attention to us and specifically provide us with validation, empathy, and understanding. We are looking for people and things that provide us with that acknowledgement in our lives. I learned this by interviewing these 2 people. You may recognize one. One is Adrian Grenier, who stars in Entourage. The other is Thomas Dason Gatita. The 2 of them did a documentary called Teenage Paparazzo about celebrities and why we care about celebrity culture. And after an hour of discussing this, the 3 of us realized the reason we pay attention to celebrities is because they are in some way a reflection of ourselves, like this puppy looking at the reflection in the mirror. Now, we pay attention because we can validate ourselves in some way. It says something about the tribe you belong to if you're a fan of Beyonce or Jay-Z or Sheryl Sandberg. That is the power of acknowledgement, and there's actually a scientific term for this. It's called the parasocial relationship. It is our capability to feel a powerful 2-way relationship with somebody or with a brand, even though it's a 1-way relationship. We can all describe Taylor Swift, but none of us, unless one of you is actually Taylor Swift's dad or something, can actually knows her. She certainly doesn't know us. At Octane AI, we have these bots that communicate on the behalf of Maroon 5, of Lindsay Lohan, of 30 Seconds to Mars, and the people really love it. They know, actually, that these are bots, but it helps build that 2-way interaction, that 2-way feeling. It scales the parasocial relationship. The lesson here, one of my final lessons to all of you, is to validate your audience in some way. And the more you can validate them, the better. One example I love always is Kickstarter. And so Kickstarter validates their audience by enabling participation. Think about Kickstarter. Kickstarter really is just the world's slowest and crappiest e-commerce website. I buy something and 10 months later, it finally gets delivered to me, if ever. And yet you feel like you're part of something, that you're contributing to something. It's something more powerful than yourself. That is the power of the bonfire of attention. So you've kind of seen these 7 kinds of triggers: automaticity and framing, disruption, reward, mystery, and acknowledgement. These triggers, they captivate our attention at these different stages. Disruption captures our attention at the short attention stage. Acknowledgement captures our attention at the long-term attention stage. And my final piece of advice to you on this is, when it's a good thing to capture attention, and it's a worthy cause to use these triggers to capture attention. We have this worry that attention is attention-seeking, all that sort of thing. But really, if you have a brand you believe in, you have a cause you believe in, then go and build that bonfire of attention. Build attention for that idea and that cause. With that, I will stop and I will say thank you very much.
Awesome. Good job.
Thank you. Don't forget the drinks.
He's definitely the guy you want to have drinks with, for sure. And his book is fantastic, and it'll be out there later, signing book plates for his book. And I really want to appreciate him. He didn't mention it, but he did injure his ankle very recently, and just a huge